we have Albert Lojko from Lightbox on today, and thank you for coming.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, this is cool. We're happy to be your first podcast. Lightbox is a really cool company, just really at the forefront of technology and commercial real estate. I know as a broker, we use Real Capital Markets often, RCM.
Thank you.
Yep. So I think 95% of institutional deals are marketed. I would say, I'm making that number up, but it feels like it. I would say are marketed.
Feels like the right number.
On
our
RCM.
Number's a little bit lower, but we love that.
Okay, yeah. Let's just say it. So I'm aware of it, but I know that there's a lot of other things that Lightbox does, and we're happy to have you on and talk about it and give us your take on the industry right now.
Yeah, fantastic. So why don't we kick it off? Tell our listeners, what Lightbox is from your words, and let's go from there.
All right. So look, the inspiration behind Lightbox was pretty simple. We had come out of the financial services industry, and if you'd watched the evolution of how that market evolved, there's a huge vendor ecosystem serving the entirety of the financial services market. And when we looked at commercial real estate as an asset class, it felt underserved. And what do I mean by that? There was no real data vendor. There was no one at the center of this helping organize the information that happens. And what you have is all these knowledge workers, trying to appraise on a building, trying to sell a building, trying to invest in a building. And it's really, really difficult because all the data is locked up in PDFs. It's locked up in emails. Sure. It's as you know, it's 1,000 snowflakes. And so really the inspiration behind Lightbox was that we felt that there was a real opportunity to help digitize and modernize, the world of commercial real estate.
Yeah. Awesome. When, so let's give everybody a little bit about your background. You were telling me before you grew up in Long Island, right? Yep. You're a pretty hearted New Yorker, true and true. Is it true and true? Or through and through? Through and through.
True and through.
True and through?
Through and true.
I was like, one of those. I was like, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah. Keep it moving.
Yeah. I don't like you today, Jack.
It all started with the coffee.
It was the coffee, man. The coffee did it all. So you've been in New York pretty much your whole life, your whole career, right? Where'd you get started?
I got started in fintech, a company called the Carson Group before fintech was even a name. And cut my teeth there, spent the first couple years of my career in New York, and then spent 5 years in Europe, helping build out business initially in Brussels and then in London.
What kind of roles were these? What were you doing at the time?
Really anything that the company needed. Truth be told, the Carson Group was very much full startup mode. So when I moved to Europe, I packed a duffel bag, moved over there. I was supposed to be there for a year or so, and I ended up there for 5 years. And during that time, we were acquired by Thomson Financial. And so the role was largely, general manager. I was running and establishing the business in Europe, Middle East, Africa and Asia. So it was quite an opportunity. This was when the European Union was all coming together. It's a different state of affairs at the moment, but really, really exciting time. Capital markets were booming and a lot of great experiences.
Yeah, very cool. So Thomson Financial becoming Thomson Reuters, right?
Correct, yeah.
So, and you were also working on, you said you were a general manager and kind of building the business. Was there any specific vertical you were building for them?
Initially, it was the corporate business. So as publicly traded companies look to tap the capital markets, particularly institutional investors, we were helping effectively do what an equity capital markets desk at an investment bank does. So we were helping there. I then went on to run the sales and trading business for Thomson Financial. Spent a bit of time with TradeWeb. We spun that asset out. It was a bank consortium, so that was a lot of fun. And then ultimately came back into Thomson Reuters post-merger to help build out their desktop, which was essentially the promise of the acquisition, which was to integrate the assets of Thomson and Reuters, bring that together into a single user interface to more effectively compete with Bloomberg and others. just prior to being at Lightbox, I was at a company called IPREO. And so when Eric Frank, who's the founder of Lightbox, when he was getting close to putting the deal together, he said, look, you should, I think this deal is going to happen. He and I had talked about the idea of building a data and technology business in commercial real estate. So I met with him, got to meet with our investors, and was really excited about the opportunity. Again, when you think about the size of real estate as an asset class, it's the single largest asset class in the world, and commercial real estate is a big piece of that.
You and Eric basically started this from the ground up, basically.
Yeah, we started from the ground up, and I think, look, there are kind of a couple ways that you could attack the space. You can, you can bootstrap something, you can go venture backed, or you can take the route that we chose, which was the backing of private equity. And I think for us, when we took a step back and looked at the opportunity in commercial real estate, the idea was, how can we affect, transformation and big change across the industry? It felt like the quickest path to do that was to go out and buy, leading companies in the market, and then build out, the network of data, network of clients and technology, to be a more formidable, player in the ecosystem across commercial real estate.
Did you have competition? I mean, it's funny because when I think of Lightbox, I almost just take it for granted, like it's been around forever. 2018 really wasn't that long ago. What else was out there at the time? Was nothing really competing? Or
I think what we saw, and I think what largely exists today, it's a very fragmented, it's a very fragmented business. So you'll find someone who, you'll find very strong players in particular markets. So, I know you mentioned
Co-stars
RCM.
of the world.
Yeah. Right. You mentioned, the
RCM.
fact that, RCM.
Yeah.
So RCM is a big player in the market, a really important part of the capital markets, ecosystem. And there are, across, environmental, across, appraisal and the lender business, you'll find, a handful of these, small players. I think to your point, there are the large, the really large scale player out there obviously is CoStar, right. Primarily on the leasing side. Obviously they've got more activity in residential, but I think the idea and the inspiration behind a lot of what we saw was the fact that the market was really fragmented. There was a real need for people to have, data and technology, to kind of do what they do. And when you think about the competitive landscape, I think, a lot of times when we're out there in the marketplace, it's very rare that we're displacing a competitor. We're going against, competitor A. That's very unusual. I think what companies in large part are doing is they're replacing soft cost with hard cost. So they've tried to collect and organize some data internally. They've tried to build a piece of technology, and it hasn't gotten them, to where they want to go. And I think, again, when you look at the market more holistically, I think what the market is really looking for is, this connected ecosystem, right? Where, if I'm marketing a property, I want to be on that same platform as the investors, and the investors want to be connected to the debt capital markets, and the debt capital markets team wants to be connected to the lenders, and then all the downstream due diligence. And so that in there is where we really see, the biggest opportunity is to leverage, the data that we have, the technology, and then frankly, the footprint across, all of the subsegments that Lightbox serves.
Basically to connect every avenue for a deal from the ground up. I've seen firsthand how the right platform can make all the difference for advisors and their clients. With decades of collective experience in investment sales, debt placement, and equity placement services, Graysteel has built a culture where collaboration, relationships, and excellence power results. Backed by concierge-level infrastructure, proprietary technology, and an entrepreneurial mindset, the firm enables professionals like myself and our team to deliver tailored solutions, precision-driven pricing strategies, AI-enhanced insights, and exceptional value at every stage. Discover how top professionals are scaling their business and continually unlocking new opportunities for their clients at graysteel.com.
Yeah, exactly.
Connecting the capital stack, connecting investors, marketing, everything, due diligence. What was the first product was the first thing that you guys came out with when Lightbox started? What was the first thing being offered?
Yeah. So, over the course of the last, 7 years, we've brought together, 10 leading companies to create what Lightbox is today. So we've been really, busy on that front, bringing those assets together. But the first product, and I think importantly, that we created was our data product. Mm-hmm. And I think what the market, like if you think about like what does the market need? The market needs standardization in order to create innovation, and specifically what does that mean? It's when you think about the world of commercial real estate, unlike the financial services where you have a ticker symbol or a CUSIP or a CDOL that identifies what is the asset that you're trading. In commercial real estate, oftentimes 25 or 30% the property or the asset that is actually being traded or evaluated isn't correct. Mm-hmm. And so the implications of that are obviously, pretty profound. And so at the core of what Lightbox has done, and one of the unique, things that we've brought to market is to truly create, the property. And so, we collect, we curate, and we QA all the data that goes into creating the property. So the parcel, the building footprints, the addresses and the sub-addresses, we bring that together. We create a unique identifier, the Lightbox ID. It's machine readable. And the importance of that is once you have identified the asset correctly, then you can we've got over 10,000 data sources, most of which are Lightbox, but many of which are third-party data sets. You can attach that to the ID. That dramatically simplifies understanding like, okay, look, this is the asset. And then from there, you can unlock a lot of possibilities in terms of analysis and insights that you want to gain.
Yeah. So you mentioned 10 companies.
Yes.
So I guess walk us through the services and divisions of what Lightbox is offering. I know there's sort of different segments. So
yeah. Maybe what I'll do is if I take it through the lens of a transaction and give you a sense of like how we play.
That's a great way of doing it.
Yeah. So as you know, we're right at the the inception of a deal. So the marketing of a deal. We've got RCM. We've recently acquired Revere, as you may have read about. So we're really excited about what we bring to the capital markets right at the very front end of the process, and then connecting that with the investor community. There'll be more to share in terms of what we're doing.
So for those that don't know, if we can just take a step back, you have a commercial property, you're marketing it. What are you going to do first, right? There's a lot of different places to put your property online, whether it's your own firm's website or a third-party website or both. And often brokers and firms will put their property on real capital markets, which is part of Lightbox, just to widely market it. So that's what we're talking about, I guess. It's a first approach in kind of analyzing what you're offering.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say even, one step before that, we're oftentimes helping the brokers prospect. So we've got, rich property intelligence that helps, brokers identify what may be the next property that is likely to transact. So they can connect with the owner of that property and do some prospecting. So at the front end of it, it's prospecting. And as you rightly point out, then we're helping in the whole marketing, deal management of that. We're providing, granular insights back to the broker in terms of the activity that's happening, on the platform. And importantly for the investor, we're a critical source of deal flow. I would say, probably 2/3 on our way to 95%, as you point out, 2/3 of deals, over $10 million. And we've got a lot below 10 million as well, but
sure.
2/3 of deals are marketed through, our platform. So a very, important source of deal flow for the investor community.
Okay.
So you guys went through a pretty intense period of a lot of M&A, you've acquired companies. So that was, I don't know what phase of the life cycle for Lightbox that was, but where are you guys at today? What's the next phase of strategies for you?
Yeah, so I would say, we've been doing acquisitions, throughout the course of that, 7-year duration. The big focus for us, as I first mentioned, was, organizing the data, getting the data into into good shape. And one of the things is that, we had to organize the data for ourselves because we have data across, a huge array of market segments. We've got the environmental data, we've got data, we've got financial data, a whole host of data that we need to bring together. And so the first thing was to solve that for ourselves. But then, in solving that problem for Lightbox, we're a microcosm of what the problem that the industry has. And so one of the things that we did was to get our identifier embedded in, the suite of applications that we have today. So we're able to bind everything to that unique identifier. And increasingly, we're seeing, incredible opportunities to help, our customers think about the lenders, think about the investors, the brokerage firms that need help organizing the huge sets of data that they have. They all have these digital strategies, digital spine, whatever the flavor is. And so we can really be at the center of helping them organize, all the data so they can make sense of that. So phase one was, let's get our data organized. Let's help ourselves. Let's help our customers, and let's help the industry. Phase two, and we've got a huge slate of products rolling out this year, is Lightbox Live. That is the SaaS-based application that brings together the full set of capabilities across Lightbox. So think transaction management, marketing, some light capabilities to understand, the activity that you have with a customer, all the rich property data that we have, and then ultimately to connect up in a meaningful way all the participants of the market in a way that just doesn't exist today.
Can you give us an example of what that looks like? If that's a lot of components to pack
for each participant, how are they utilizing it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you think about the participants, there's all the due diligence providers. So the environmental engineers, the appraisers, and the law firms maybe working on some of the zoning and the closing documents. And then you have in the capital market space, you've got the investment sales brokers, you've got debt capital markets, and then you've got the acquisition teams and disposition teams at the investor side. And so, ultimately the goal is to bring all those participants onto a single platform. We're starting with our environmental engineers. It's a very important, business to us. And, part of it is the application and the workflow and the analysis tools. So if you think about the environmental engineer, they're thinking about the layer below the structure, what's in the soil, what do I need to understand about that? And then not only is it just the application, we've spent, huge investment in digitizing, lots of data that exists in books and PDFs and things like that. And so we've embarked on a really important project with something called city directories. This means a lot to our environmental engineers. The easiest way to think of this data set, it's historical occupants. And so if you are going to put a restaurant in down the street here and you realize that it was a dry cleaner in the 70s, you probably need to do a little bit more diligence on that. And so we're bringing, in the case of environmental engineer, we're going to have Lightbox Live for that segment of the market. We're going to bring together huge amounts of data that was unstructured in PDFs. We're bringing a lot of newer technology, machine learning, machine vision, lots of capabilities to help sift through the huge array of data. A lot of this stuff exists in PDFs and books that, some of which, haven't been digitized, like the city directory.
So my question, anytime that you have this much data coming into one platform, how do you guys check the integrity? To me, I'm so technologically in advance that I'm envisioning thousands of people just sitting there and verifying facts. How are you doing this at such a large scale?
Yeah, great question. We see across what's interesting, if you take a look at the commercial real estate market, a lot of times what happens is somebody goes out and gets structured data. They go get data. They're going to put the inputs in there into their model and do something. Ultimately, the output of this thing is a gigantic PDF that gets sent off to a bank or whatever the case is. The bank gets that, and then they have to pull out the data, structure it to do some analysis on an appraisal review or, name your favorite report. And the beat goes on. And the same thing, we're offering memorandums, et cetera. And so, fundamentally, the way that we tackle this is we obviously have experts in-house that are very, capable and have deep knowledge. But we are leveraging, large language models. We're leveraging a lot of the AI tools that you see out there. We've got enterprise versions of that, with a human in the loop. And so we've invested in technology and people as part of the, AI ecosystem there to really think about how we extract the data, how we make sure that it's accurate. And so I think, the advantage that we have today of doing this, if we were doing this, 5 years ago, you would, to your point, you'd have to hire, huge teams of people. But today the technology makes it a lot easier to do. Certain document types are harder than others. And that's where we put a human into that. And others are pretty much, straightforward. We're able to, leverage the technology to extract the data.
I've seen firsthand how the right platform can make all the difference for advisors and their clients. With decades of collective experience in investment sales, debt placement, and equity placement services, Graysteel has built a culture where collaboration, relationships, and excellence power results. Backed by concierge-level infrastructure, proprietary technology, and an entrepreneurial mindset, the firm enables professionals like myself and our team to deliver tailored solutions, precision-driven pricing strategies, AI-enhanced insights, and exceptional value at every stage. Discover how top professionals are scaling their business and continually unlocking new opportunities for their clients at graysteel.com. We mentioned third parties. We mentioned brokers, salespersons who are using it. Who else are we missing there? Investors and buyers, I guess, as well. How are they utilizing it other than just being a marketplace to look at deals?
Yeah. So today, they're largely using us to look at deals. They're also leveraging our property data to understand, where someone might look to develop what's a ripe opportunity. One of the interesting data sets that we have, we've got a huge amount of proprietary data sets. I talked about, the core of what we do, which is creating the property and the identifier. We've obviously got the deepest and richest history of environmental data across the board, which is integral to every single transaction. But we also have other data sets that we created. We realize that there is no national zoning layer, right? And so when you think about all the activity that's happening around, redevelopment opportunities, the builder developer community, data centers, all these various things, it's really important to understand what is the zoning? And so we built out this national zoning layer. No one else has it. It's been a huge success. And, there's nice opportunity in there for lots of our investors, developers to be able to discern, okay, look, here's the zoning and here's the land use. And therefore the land use is X, but the zoning is Y. Can I build an industrial facility here? Yep. And so we're finding great opportunities with that data set.
Got it.
Yeah, that's a very complicated issue to solve. Everybody has their own zoning regulations.
Yeah, and it's fragmented by markets, completely. I know too, which is.
And even if you're in a place like New York where you have so much data, like more than you know what to do with, you arguably have the most complicated zoning laws here. So right now, this application is telling you, obviously based on land use and zoning code, what you can build. Are you also adding in features like about the density and how much, how tall of a building you could put on a parcel?
Yeah, we look at all those attributes. I would say like some of the big use cases, we're finding, today is really around, data centers. People are clamoring to get their hands on data centers. So we bring together lots of data that, some of which you spoke about, but, demographic data increasingly. If you're looking for data centers, you're looking for power, cooling, a lot of other, attributes. And so whether it's data that we have or whether it's third-party data, we're very open to bring, third-party data onto the platform to solve these bigger, issues that our clients have.
Yeah. And, taking a step back, you were talking about just all the data in PDFs, right? So it's so antiquated. Everything's in a PDF. And there's a lot of fluff, right? Yeah. And particularly in offering memorandums, right? I mean, I'm just looking at this from my experience, right? When you look at a broker's offering memorandum, there is a lot of fluff from an investor's perspective, I think, often. And sometimes you just want the data. just give me the data, right? And so I always keep thinking there's got to be a better way for investors to cull out all the data from, tons of offering memorandums and compile that data and then overlay that with, market cap breaks, sale comps, lease comps, right? So it's all in one place. And I keep thinking, we've had on some folks kind of more involved in AI.
Yeah. We had Mike Mandel.
Mike Mandel from CompStack was on. And so we're always thinking about how is technology and AI going to make everything just easier for folks? What are your thoughts on basically everything I just said and where things are going and what you're doing about it?
Yeah, we're leaning in on AI and its application. I think that there's probably 3 categories of innovation that you can do with AI, and I'll talk a little bit about kind of what we're doing across each of those dimensions. One is to extract, structured data and insights out of data.
Yeah.
Sorry, out of unstructured data, out of these PDFs that you're talking about. That's number one. Number 2 is, generative AI, offering memorandums, appraisal documents, property condition assessments, phase 1s, et cetera, et cetera. All of these could be aided by, leveraging generative AI. And then lastly, and I think what, most people interact with day to day is like, how do I interact with an AI capability, right? So put a question in, get an answer, right? And so I think there's 3 dimensions that we're looking at. To your point around, the documents, I think we're going to live in a world where, PDFs are going to exist for a lot longer than anyone else would hope. But that's sort of the world that we exist. So I think what we see is in parallel creating kind of a digital path, for that data. And so to that extent, we're working with initially the lender community. So if you imagine, we've got over, 200,000 appraisals go through our network every year. So we see quite a lot of activity. The banks have a desire to reach into all the PDFs that they have, all these appraisal documents, and extract out, like, look, how much activity, like, what's the average cap rate on, what I'm lending and what's happening in a market, in an asset class, in a sub-asset class. And so today that information is locked up in a PDF. They don't have an ability to derive insight and really understand, what's in their portfolio. Mm-hmm. And so we are working, we've got over 1,100 banks on our platform. So we're working with the banks, each of them, to help solve this problem for them. So we can give them, a digital structured data set that allows them to see, what's in their portfolio, how that's performing. And then, as you think about, other document types, offer memorandums, et cetera, you can see, where the future is going to go, which is, people are going to look to get this data structured, standardized, normalized, and then ultimately, aggregated so they can understand, how am I doing relative to the benchmark?
Yeah.
So I think that, on the data extraction side, that's what we're seeing. AI, embedded into what we do. It's going to change. I think, we're going to really democratize how people get at data. You're going to be able to put questions in and get answers. Like, look, tell me, what's happening in this market, or where's the, give me a property, give me the properties that are of this size, in this range, that their mortgages come due, whatever, and voila, you're going to get that answer. Yeah. And so I think as it relates to, AI as like this really powerful search capability, we're excited about that. And then, on the generative side, we see huge amounts of time being spent on offering memorandums, on, appraisal documents. And we think there's an opportunity to help create, an early version draft, if you will, of what that looks like. So I think it's going to be an exciting time, to be here. I think just given the amount of data that's unstructured and locked up in PDFs, the technology is going to unlock opportunities faster, I think, than people can imagine.
Yeah, I think using a large language model to just cull out a lot of the BS and get to what you want is that's the future.
I mean, you guys are a large language model. Your whole data set is exactly that, right? To train AI on. You brought up appraisals, and I kind of, since the start of this whole AI thing, I've always had this thought, like, why why aren't appraisals much more automated? I think there's some groups out there working on this. I think like Bowery Valuation.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with their tech, but I know that they're trying to solve this because an appraisal is 90% repetitive information.
Yeah.
Like it's very, very template. And then a guy comes in, checks your latest financials, hopes that you're doing everything correctly and goes, all right, like here's kind of where I think your property has changed. But largely, the demographics you can update almost instantly. That's like it all either comes from BLS or the Fed. Like it's very easily accessible, but it's still a 120-page document, and somebody has to go and scrub this thing. It's like it's the most inefficient thing that I can think of.
There's a lot.
One of in real estate.
Yeah, there's a lot of repetitive, and I think Lightbox is somewhat unconventional. I think what was interesting to me when I came out of financial services into prop tech is I saw these prop tech companies saying like, I'm going to automate away what an appraiser does. I'm going to automate away what a broker. You don't need a broker. I can, create a virtual tour. I can create all the data sets that you want. We have a very different view of the world, which is that we want to enable all these knowledge workers with actionable data that allows them to do what they get paid to do, right? If I'm an appraiser, I'm not getting paid to put in the demographics. I'm getting paid to put evaluations, select comps, and do that. And so our view of the world is very much that we can, take out a lot of these redundant activities, these non-core things that have to go in that are important elements of that, and allow these people to focus on the valuation side of it, right? Or if I'm a broker, to help more effectively market this deal. And so that's sort of the world in which we see. But to your point, exactly, like we want to rip out the salient data that exists in these to allow people to make better decisions, because locked up in that document along with the demographic data is a lot of vital financial information that needs to be analyzed on a deal by deal basis.
Albert, I keep thinking there are a lot of new prop tech companies coming out every single week, right? And I imagine a lot that are trying to compete with a lot of the offerings that Lightbox has. What do you think is going to be the key to success for some of these to succeed versus not? Because I know, as a broker, we're always looking at new pieces of technology, but we don't always want to invest in a new piece of technology if it's going to be gone in a year or two.
Yeah, I think it's, and when we started Lightbox, we deliberately didn't start out in the sort of venture world. And I think like that it's been really tough for a lot of the players to do that. And I also think that like, it's hard to think about like, choosing a vendor. Yeah. Let me take a step back. I think one of the important considerations is for these companies to survive is that one, you need access to content, and you need to be a trusted partner. And so, getting, having the data is the first important thing. And the second thing is being a trusted, vendor to be able to get these observations and insights out back to the customers. And I think one of the challenges that's going to exist for some of the smaller prop techs is to get critical mass to win over these customers, and particularly the lenders. One of the things that we see is, oftentimes there's interesting innovation that happens, and companies trying to sell their product into a lender. Well, that process to get selected and get approved by that bank is very, very difficult. And so I think it's just been a challenging environment for some of these companies to establish agreements and get things in place with big institutions. Yeah,
basically having that critical mass of clients that can kind of sustain you, I guess, and grow your legitimacy, I guess. Is that part of it?
Yeah, I think it's legitimacy, and I think also it's like we live in a world where people want to connect with one another. And so if I'm serving you, the broker, and all I'm doing is, serving you, but I don't have anything meaningful on the other side of it with the investors, and I don't have any of the other ancillary things that you may need for your debt capital markets and connectivity to the lenders. Again, like I've solved one piece of the problem, but I haven't solved, that more holistically. And like a good example of that is, you look at the brokerage firms, and a lot of them are looking to become one-stop shop to their customers, right? I want to provide the range of services. What are the range of services? I want to sell you the property. I want to help you finance the property. I want to do the appraisal work on that. I want to do the environmental work. I may even want to do the zoning work.
And manage it.
And manage it, right? And so our view of the world is very much that, like, look, that consolidation is going to take place. We want to be the one-stop data provider, to that brokerage firm to help them facilitate, those activities across, all their businesses. And so I think the world in which you have just a point solution, there'll always be a place for that, for certain. But I think what the market is clamoring for is, things to get, more connected, more standardized, so that all these interactions that happen across the marketplace are a lot easier. There's just a lot of friction everywhere you go in the process.
That's a real vertical integration. I mean, I think that's a big theme across all industries today. You kind of hit this point. Like, we went through such a big tech boom where all of these companies basically start to compete on cost, right? A bunch of new concepts came out, things like AI come out, and it makes your life easier, but it's all disparate, right? And you're piecing these sources together. And now I think a lot of industries, especially our industries, is going through a point where, it's hard to vertically integrate these things. It's not an easy solution, but it's a necessary solution. So, and that's going to spark a new kind of like industrial revolution in our space. The news is important, but if you're a busy real estate professional like me, you don't have time to skim through dozens of dry and ad-filled media outlets each day. That's why I read the CRE Daily. It's a free email newsletter that cuts through the clutter and delivers concise, witty commentary on the latest trends and transactions in commercial real estate. If you're a commercial real estate professional, you owe it to yourself to try it out and stay on top of what's happening in the industry. It's only 5 minutes a day. Visit credaily.com to sign up for free.
Yeah, I agree, and it is hard. And I think the getting data organized is at the center, of that, and then it's having the distribution to be able to, proliferate in the case of an ID or something like that. That it sort of becomes a market standard, because without that standard, it's hard to innovate, or you're innovating, on your island, but the rest of the marketplace isn't.
And when you talk about the standard, is there a protocol that you're following and other groups are following, or are you making one? Like, what does that look like for you?
So we've created that standard, which is our Lightbox ID, and then we're helping customers, because customers have to get from wherever they are to this standard. So if you're on our platform, great, like you're already using the standard, and when you're speaking with your counterparts, they're all on that same standard. But we also offer geocoding and services to help customers get from where they are to the standard. So you have, a whole portfolio of addresses. So you can, hit our APIs, be able to programmatically get all that address data, get the unique identifier. And then what these companies are looking to do is they have all the host of other data that they have across, their organization. So they can use that identifier to connect not only all the data they get from Lightbox, but their internal sources of data and third-party data.
Yeah. So Lightbox ID is connected to a property.
Yes.
And so you click on that Lightbox ID, and that's where from there you can see the full array of services that you guys offer.
You can see the full array of data sets that are available. So you say, look, here's the property. It's got, 5 buildings across 3 parcels, this amount of addresses. And then from there, here's who owns the property. Here's all the other property level data around it, the demographic data, the environmental data, the financial data, et cetera, the transaction history.
Yeah.
So it allows you just to organize all that data, down to the property level.
Got it. Well, it seems like it's becoming very much M&A driven a little bit here, right? I mean, you guys have acquired 10 different companies. Do you see this turning into a common trend where there's going to be just like kind of 2 or 3 main players that everyone's going to go to? I mean, it just seems like there's such a proliferation right now of these small startups. And I keep trying to think of what's their end game. And I'm assuming their end game is to get bought out by a Lightbox. You tell us.
Look, I think there's plenty of room for innovation across the industry, and we're going to continue to see new entrants. And I think that's great, and it's healthy for the market. At the same time, I do think that, what across the market, what our customers seem to be clamoring for is, the need to get, the entirety of the market, onto, a platform or a few platforms that helps them facilitate their business in ways, that they can't do today. Let's face it, there's a lot of redundant costs. You can look at all these companies, they're saddled with a lot of additional costs that frankly are non-core business activities, that they're doing today. So I think as they jettison that and leverage, more and more the vendor community, you're going to see, pretty spectacular growth in that part of the market. And I think it's going to be very analogous to what we saw in financial services back in the day. Goldman Sachs and Citigroup, they would collect their own data and they had all kinds of internal efforts. Fast forward, a couple of decades, Bloomberg came from $0 to $10 billion, London Stock Exchange, S&P, FactSet. So I think you're going to see a healthy vendor ecosystem. That's going to be great for the industry. It's going to be great for the vendor community. But I don't think you're going to end up with, one or two players. I think you're going to see, a lot of great businesses, get created. You'll see some consolidation. You'll see some natural new entrants. But I think there's going to be a lot of activity, a lot of innovation, and it's going to be, a big benefit, to the entirety of the market, because I think as you look out, there's more and more data that people need to analyze to make decisions. And so the industry can't support running the business, the way that it is. And so that's just going to necessitate, more vendors and more prop tech companies entering the field.
What do you think happens to commercial real estate professionals? What do you think happens, right? I mean, this is one of those few industries where, the narrative is it's very much a relationship business, and there's always going to need to be some sort of human touch. But let's be honest, there's definitely going to be a change in what's needed out there. What's the future? What happens to folks in the industry as technology and AI continues to evolve?
Yeah, I think that we're always going to have, as long as we're working in this industry and in our lifetime, the brokers, the appraisers, they're going to be a critical part of this. They're not going away. I think what you'll see is you'll see a shift in the activity. I think some of the more mundane activities that we talked about earlier, like those are going to go the way of technology, and we're going to create, efficiencies for them to be able to focus on what they do. But let's face it, if you're going to go out and you're going to do a big transaction, you're going to want to talk to the broker. Right. You're going to want that context. You're going to want that. You're going to want that color. I think the broker is going to have a lot more data at their fingertips. I think the investors are going to be way more informed about the dynamics of what's happening in that market. So you're going to have a more sophisticated, informed conversation, but humans are going to be, very much at the center of that. There'll be, some transformation over time, but you're always going to have, people at the center of this. I think in other parts of the market, we've got in the appraisal industry, there just aren't enough appraisers. They're aging out. Nobody. My kids have decided they don't want to be an appraiser. I don't think, there's not enough appraisers out there. Right. And so I think what's going to happen is, data and technology is going to help allow, that part of the market to scale in the way that it should, right?
Yeah.
And so the market's going to benefit from it. There's going to be more transparency. There's going to be more tools. But you're always going to need, especially in the world of commercial real estate, which is more complicated, you're going to need professionals, to rely on. I think the same thing is true in residential. I don't know what the numbers are, but like Zillow's out there, but residential brokers are still very, very busy and, relied on. So
yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, I think we have to kind of pivot, and it's going to be who can utilize technology better, who can utilize AI into their day-to-day, workflow better. But hopefully it doesn't mean people are out of jobs.
No,
we'll see.
I feel confident in saying that that's not going to happen. I mean, you look at the arc of what happened. I think the same thing was true in financial services. People said, "Oh, like you're not going to need a wealth advisor, or you're not going to need whatever." No, the truth is that they're using, data and analysis to inform you on what's happening with your portfolio. But when the market's down 7%, you pick up the call. You pick up the phone and call your broker and say, "Hey, look what's going on. I need some insight." Right.
But I think you're right. So I used to be in another life an attorney, and I was just
sorry to hear that.
Yeah, thank you. I don't like to admit that to a lot of folks. But I was just playing around with chat the other day, and said, "Draft me a motion on XYZ," and boom, right there. And, and I think there are some professions that I just don't see how they're really going to continue to be a thing, right? I mean, if these large language models, they can reason. If you're an attorney, maybe you still have to obviously proof it, but you can put in all the facts of your case and say, draft me a motion on X, Y, Z, and from this perspective, and it'll do it. But I don't think that is as much of a relationship business.
Yeah.
Like real estate is. So that to me is a big differentiator between industries like law and industries like real estate.
To your point also, that's an overlay, right? Like the human element still needs to be there. You need somebody who looks it over
but less of it, right? I mean, not as many humans.
Yeah, but if you think about what it just did, it just made your life easier.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the attorney goes away. Definitely not litigators. You're not going to litigate with ChatGPT.
You might. I don't know. You might.
You have
really
to connect.
to it.
You have to connect on a human level, and it's no different than with the broker. Like you use the example of the wealth advisor. If the market was tanking and everything is down 13%, this is 2008, and I pick up my phone and call the wealth advisor, I want to hear the real sentiment. The computer is going to tell me it's not looking well, but I don't know, maybe they're positioning to do something better.
Call your large language model and see what
see what they say. Yeah.
All right, so we're kind of running low on time. But I mean, Albert, tell us what's next for Lightbox. Where do you see it going over the next decade?
Look, I think a big focus of what you're going to see from Lightbox is, connecting all the market participants across commercial real estate. Our data and data model will be at the very center of kind of what we're seeing there. But we're going to allow the market to operate more efficiently, to collaborate, to have data and insights today that aren't possible, that I think are going to be really exciting. And we're really bullish. I mean, I think that the market is ripe for this. We've had like a lot of dislocations in the market over the last couple of years. I think nobody predicted we'd be in a COVID environment and in the interest rate environment that we are. But that's allowed us at Lightbox to focus in heavily on R&D and building out a lot of the assets that we have. And so, we're excited over the next couple of years to get this into the hands of users, to iterate, to innovate, and to get that feedback. And we're really putting our customers at the center of this strategy, figuring out what are the biggest, hardest problems that we can solve for them. We're leveraging the latest in the technology, AI, et cetera. So we're bullish, we're excited. And I think there's a lot of room to innovate across the market. So while Lightbox is really excited about our position in the market, we're excited about the competitive landscape and what that's going to mean for commercial real estate. I think it's going to follow the arc that we saw in equities and fixed income. I think that commercial real estate will become a more not an alternative, but more mainstream, investment class. And that's just going to necessitate, the things that we talked about here today.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming, Albert. I appreciate it. This was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It was great to hear about your background. Great to hear about, your vision for this sect of the industry and how you guys are approaching it.
Yeah.
Great. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks for coming.